more you find productive solutions from it, the more you want to keep trying.
People are using generative AI tools and other AI tools for hiring.
Entry-level jobs are going to be replaced is true.
What sort of things are you doing to make sure that kind of scrappy owner mindset stays alive inside of a scaled-up company?
The biggest fear right now is people aren't reading the books. They're watching the TikToker who says, I read this book and here are the 3 takeaways.
Bryan, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Brandon, thanks for having me.
You got quite a history. Your resume, it goes deep. You've led people teams at Google, Square, Yahoo, and now at Nextdoor. And with all that experience, I'm sure your beliefs have changed over time about what it takes to build a great workplace. And this podcast is all about workplace transformation. A lot of that's changed over the years about how we think about the workplace. And I want to know for you, what's changed in all of your roles leading you to Nextdoor now, if anything?
Yeah, I think, so much has changed. I started my career in the late 90s. So I was a dot-commer when I moved to the Bay Area. I still, early part of my career, I remember working kind of before the internet was part of the equation, which is
it's wild to think about.
Difficult to try to imagine for a lot of people today, but definitely has some resonance with how AI is entering the workforce today. So like lots of things have changed. I think the thing that strikes me often today that I really find contemplating is the nature of the chief people officer has changed. Lots of people talk about this, but I think it really was focused for a long time on this kind of service delivery. So be really good at recruiting, make sure your systems around performance management or compensation are kind of they're not creating problems or hopefully solving problems at scale. But it was also to just like no news is good news, so you can get back to focusing on the work was really, I think, a lot of what success was defined as. And a few things have happened in the 2020s. The first was really COVID-19, pandemic, which just disrupted the nature of working from home or working in an office and what that meant for everybody. But also just navigating a pandemic, like what it meant when employees would gather, when the disease was really poorly understood. There's a ton of social unrest in the United States, but really globally, it's the polarization of politics entering the workforce has really spiked. And then more recently with how AI is changing things, it just means the problems that are being put in front of the chief people officer are much harder to sort through. What I used to see a lot is people would want to hire great HR leaders from companies that did it really well. So you could basically adapt and implement a playbook from another organization. And those 3 problems sets don't have a lot of playbooks to copy. So it's just forced 2 things. The people leaders have to be much more creative and strategic in how they kind of take this on. And it's something all the other leaders are really looking to also address. It's not something they can ignore in how they're running their organizations. That's really elevated the relationship of the chief people officer amongst their peers and what the CEO is to look to them. That's been a big change.
One of the things that I think about for employers and even chief people officers like yourself is how much the individual's needs are changing based on what they consume in their everyday life, like buying DoorDash, like getting the food that they want on DoorDash, AI personalization on Netflix, one-click buying on Amazon, like all of these things in their personal life, like frictionless experience. But these are also employees inside organizations, so they're probably applying a lot of pressure to the systems inside of the organization and to have a similar frictionless experience at work. Have you experienced that with your employees and other roles you've had to?
Yeah, because I think that's actually something that is very similar to prior tech disruptions. So the example today is, ChatGPT, and there's lots of other great AI products too, but ChatGPT is over 500 million users. So like everybody's using AI as a consumer. And so they bring the expectation that they can use things like that at work, and the one that it reminds me a lot of is phones. Like people today don't realize when kind of after the iPhone launched, people wanted to start to use their own personal phones to access things like email or instant message at work. And a lot of IT functions are like, no freaking way. We have to control the device. They have to use their work phone, their BlackBerry or whatever. And so to think today that you wouldn't use your phone to do work of some kind, whether it's, knock out a few emails or Slacks or like, you just can't even imagine that wouldn't be allowed. And when I hear of companies, because banks are still like this, that you're just not allowed to use your personal device to do any work, it just kind of rejects the reality of the cloud, or there's some level of security that's so significant. Again, banks, so much money's involved. The rules are a little different, but it just seems really abnormal. And so that consumer pressure puts pressure on the enterprise to adopt these disruptions. And I definitely feel that with AI products today.
With AI, I'm sure with small businesses, it probably feels like the Wild West. Enterprise level organizations that are already scaled, they probably have the staff and the means to implement these AI tools, but it's changing so fast. So I'm like wondering how, not only in a chief people officer role, but like your technology leader, how fast are you working to implement these tools? Because I know that your people are probably wanting to use it.
I mean, this is not news, but the pace of change related to AI is so dramatic. I think the way the LLMs are leapfrogging each other, the way new things come out, the way the hot thing from 6 months ago is already gone. Like it's really volatile. And I think that's difficult for enterprises because you tend to want to pay for something and then invest over time to really build it into your stack. And so it's really, it makes me anxious. Like I see something, I think it's great. And then I've already changed my mind on certain tools. So I think that what that means is we're all just really learning. The goal right now is to be learning at a really high velocity, because what I've seen, and I would say probably for the last 9 to 10 months, maybe a little longer now, like I'm really investing a lot of time myself personally, and increasingly with my team, the people team, on trying to figure this out, because the learning hurdles are real. This isn't,
they are.
This isn't like you kind of buy it and someone teaches you how to implement it and then it's integrated. It's disrupting the way teams work together, the way people get their job done. And there's all these related issues on people are worried it's going to replace them, which I don't think is going to happen nearly as quickly as people, people are broadcasting. So it really makes a mess of things. And the thing that's kind of very top of mind for me right now, and you've seen other chief human resources officers talk about this, is historically the decision to hire somebody or purchase software were totally discrete exercises. You can frame it as personnel and non-personnel if you really want to go back, and how like the accounting treatment would be. So it's like not the same people discussing things, and usually any type of software buy, someone's going to be using it, so they don't really overlap. But what's narrowing really fast is the question of who's going to do this work. Is it going to be a tool or a person? And it's becoming more of a trade-off. Rapidly, it's becoming a trade-off. But again, some people feel like it's fake news that you can implement the tool to do a person's job, then there's that whole loop. But I think that it's a reason why the chief people officers need to be in charge of this, or at least
at the table,
in the room.
Yeah.
You can't do it differently now. Like I spend so much time with our IT and IS leaders, more in the last 6 to 9 months than I ever have, because of this, how to reconcile this.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating. I find it really, really exciting. It's very, very disruptive, and that like right on the back of the work from home disruption is wild. Oh, yeah. Like the nature of work is really changing.
The disruption the last 4 to 5 years has been incredible. The AI stuff, it just feels like you're constantly behind because it's changing on the daily. You reshared something from Lars Schmidt, who I've had on the podcast before, about when ChatGPT 5 came out.
Yeah.
It like disrupted the GPTs where you may have already created. So he had kind of modeled out like how to basically recreate within ChatGPT 5 for that framework. And so you're thinking about that kind of stuff. It makes me anxious too, of like, I've already done all this work and this learning, but it's just never done. Do you feel anxious about it, or does it affect you in a way that's feeling like you're just not doing enough?
Definitely. Although I'm also realizing more and more how many people aren't really doing anything either.
Yeah.
That number is really big. A great shout out to Lars. That was the best thing I learned this month, was rewriting all of my GPTs and asking it to just upgrade itself using the new GPT-5 capabilities. Had tip to Lars. That was great. But I think what I've found, and we certainly see this at Nextdoor, and I talk to a lot of peers that run the same thing, is a lot of the people you really want to become power users of AI, because they're just, every company has these people who are just wired in across functions and get like 10 times as much done as anybody else. They're really busy, you know, and the time you have to really sink to learn how to make it go is significant. And it's not true that all of those people have just kind of dedicated themselves to rolling up their sleeves and teaching themselves. And because the tools and the capabilities are changing so fast, it's hard to really standardize the learning. So that's what I think has been really interesting. An article I keep coming back to was in Hacker News a few weeks ago, that it showed, you know, when engineers adopt some of the AI co-pilots, Cursor, Claude Code, it actually makes them less productive early on. And it makes sense. They don't know how to use the tool. Right. But then if they invest and they get up to speed, it will make them more productive down the road. But what happens is a lot of people feel like they're trying, now they're behind, it's not working immediately. So they go back to doing what they know, because now they got to get something done. And so how companies are really navigating this, you know, time commitment to get people up to speed is increasingly a harder question than I thought. I would say 6 months ago, I thought, hey, if we just do some hackathons and get people to learn the basics, it'll just go. But it's more complex and intertwined than that.
So true. I think about this a lot. I'm actually inside my organization. We're only 100 employees, so small business. Nobody's really leading this. So I kind of took it upon myself to lead this inside our organization. Done a couple internal talks and showed people some use cases, and clearly not everybody is using it the same way, and some people not at all. And so I'm like, well, how do I do this at scale? So I'm building a web course that people can go through just to get people at a baseline level. And then I hope it snowballs after that. But I mean, inside of an organization at scale like Nextdoor, who's owning it, for one? And then, you know, or who might be involved, and how are you thinking about scaling knowledge on AI across the company?
Yeah. So coming to the beginning of the year, we talked about it as an executive team. And I was like, I'm really concerned. You know, I think because, you know, Nextdoor did a major product relaunch about a month ago. And so our total organizational focus for a year has been this product relaunch. And I was trying to not do the thing you want to avoid, which is like, you can't have two top priorities, you know, but I felt like we can't wait either. And so I was like, you know what, have our product team focus on the product. Like, I'm going to pull in a few people and I'm just going to push this. So I gave myself, at my founder CEO's blessing, another title, Grand Poo-Bai, which is POBAI, you know, and really went to work on this. And I think one of the things I was glad looking back I did was I also mobilized the people team with me. I was like, we're all doing two jobs now. We've just got to figure this out in different ways. Every part of the people team, like, we have to be working on what works and what doesn't. A lot of experimentation. And so we started off, we were using like this 3 month at a time phase at the company level. You know, we do a lot of this. We call it Project Neighbor, but spelled NAIBOR. And it was a really cross-functional effort. I'd say the people team and the ISIT teams were the most involved, which makes sense. But we pulled in people from every function to really start to own the functional translation of how they're going to do it. So we piloted our own training. You know, I made it with a counterpart. We used ChatGPT to develop the curriculum, and we didn't know where it was going to go. It ended up turning into a AI fundamentals course, really
Awesome.
well received. We handpicked the first group, and then we just invited the whole company. Hey, whoever wants to come to this. And so the first phase, we were just really trying to ignite attention. You know, like, we just wanted to up the experimentation energy and just kind of a low bar for success, but just get everybody trying things. And we ended phase one with a hackathon. A lot of companies do. And so that was kind of the crescendo of 3 months of just getting people to learn the basics and try things. And so now we're in this second big phase. And I think that if I could frame the shift, is phase one was really like, what can you do with AI? And phase two is really, how would you use AI to solve the problem in front of you? So less optionality, you know, and that we're kind of forcing more of we should be further along now. You can't be kind of still too busy at this point in our company's journey. And so we're making great progress. We've implemented enterprise grade tools. We use Glean here. And so now it's about we're committed to Glean, and we want to really build it in. So there's a lot of work to do when you introduce a tool like that.
Yeah. Bryan, you said before we started recording that 80% of your time, whether thinking or doing, is around AI. And I'm just curious for you, this is kind of a two-part question. How are you using it personally within your work? How are you using generative AI? Or how is your people function using it? And have you been able to leverage it in ways that you otherwise would have had a person to have on staff?
Yeah, I think I'll start with myself. The biggest change AI has had on me personally is how I spend my time in a given week. And what I mean by that is, for a long time, once I became, executive or whatever, leader, most of your time is spent in meetings, and you're trying to align and review and get teams moving. That's just how people in a bigger organization spend their time traditionally. And what I found is, I started out trying to find time to use AI, just like I wanted to try this and wanted to use it. As I started to figure out things that I wanted to do, like I think one of the first insights you learn in really leveraging AI is to treat it like a teammate, not like a tool. And lots of people present it that way in different training, but I think this is really foundational to how you interact with it. It's very different from any other type of software program you would use if you can shift that mindset. And so one thing I started doing was I started setting one-on-ones on my calendar with me, and it's on my calendar. It says one-on-one with AI. And I've now kind of built these custom GPTs that have these certain personas that I want to do work on the same way I would work with a direct report on. And so this has now really organized my time almost like a project plan versus what you kind of do in your free space time, which is just kind of noodle on things. So as I've started to really cover ground, I have a list of stuff that I want to work on with my AI teammate, which is bizarre. That's just not how I use technology. Yeah. But it really changed my own behavior and how to think about that time and really go things. So I've done things like I've developed our whole leadership offsite with ChatGPT as my L&D partner. I don't have an L&D partner at Nextdoor currently, and it did a great job with me kind of thinking differently about how to take advantage of the knowledge capability that ChatGPT has. So just different programs I want to kind of get my own thoughts into. It can just synthesize and summarize and strengthen so quickly if I just stay focused on these things. So that's kind of me personally. And then as I've looked across the people team, each one of my directs, I was like, you've got to be using this stuff too. And you'll start to figure out where it can help you and where it either isn't going to help you or it's going to take a while to figure out. And the more you find productive solutions from it, the more you want to keep trying.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I read a few weeks ago, I think Sam Altman came out and talked about how people were using ChatGPT as like for a therapy session, essentially. And I know like a lot of people struggle with mental health. I think you talk about mental health a lot. Yeah. And as a chief people officer, you're clearly thinking about mental health. Are you encouraging people to use ChatGPT and other functions like that for coaching, mental health therapy, things like that? Have you used it? I'm just really curious how you think about this.
So I feel I've been a certified coach for a long time, and one of my criticisms of the coaching industry is too often they occupy a space a therapist should occupy, and they're not qualified to be a therapist, and it can lead to really dangerous outcomes. So I take kind of therapy and that type of mental health support really seriously, and should be really careful, because if you have needs and you end up in a conversation or an experience where being with a trained professional is like really important, it can actually really backfire and make things a lot worse than if you just hadn't even started. So I don't love ChatGPT as a therapist, and it was great to see OpenAI kind of course correct and introduce functionality to shut it off if it gets to a bad place, so to speak. I think that's really responsible on their part. At the same time, I've got a ton of value out of framing ChatGPT to be a critic of mine. And I think you also learn early on that because it's ultimately really built on pattern matching at like a super, super high scale, it kind of leads to a bias to confirm that you're on the right track when you're doing stuff. And so this is another thing you learn kind of early on with working with AI tools. If you just position as like, what am I missing? Where am I biased? What have I not thought about? How can you make this stronger? That will get you a totally different type of answer than if you just ask what it thinks. It's like, oh, great job, you're awesome. So making it critic, I think, is really significant.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of critic and bias, people are using generative AI tools and other AI tools for hiring. And I don't know if you use it at Nextdoor. I'm a little worried some people are using it in unintended ways because of bias that's built not only into these tools, but in how they're using it. How are you thinking about this as well in terms of how managers might be using this for hiring?
I mean, I think a lot of the easy, immediate applications is how can you save time, particularly in preparation. I would be a little wary on having it to do the decision. I mean, maybe you can have it audit the decision of the group. But I was a recruiter for a long time, and I was the type of recruiter that would realize I'm interviewing someone in 5 minutes and who is this person again? And I would look up their LinkedIn and be like, okay, right. Okay. Yeah, sure. I got it. And what I could have done with AI, as far as just prepping me for the conversation now, is amazing.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of recruiters have to balance the time of talking to tons of people, trying to build rapport quickly, trying to get a sense of stuff they've worked on. And you have to cover a lot of ground on the basics that I think ChatGPT can really help accelerate. Not that you can skip it, but that you can move a lot faster to building rapport and connection, right? Just from the recruiting perspective. And same thing with hiring managers. You're trying to, I don't know that I would have replaced the hiring manager with an AI decision, but AI can really augment a lot of the work that recruiting teams do in partnership with their internal customers. And there's lots of creative ways to do that.
This first big wave of AI has been generative AI, and I'm sure that's what we're talking about here is how are our people using it? How can we use it? But this next phase of agentic AI is really got me having some sleepless nights, because I think the really fast moving companies are going to adopt some of these strategies and become more really efficient and do repeatable tasks just so much faster. I do have some worries about how you're giving these AI tools access to go do whatever, click around on the internet or do certain functions a human used to do. How are you thinking about agentic AI, and are you using any of those tools yet?
Definitely. So massive opportunity that is just not simple or straightforward.
Right.
I was meeting earlier today and with my head of people operations, Shandy Ortiz. She's really downfield on thinking about how to implement Glean and build agents. The challenge we're thinking about today is, we haven't even really launched Glean yet. We officially launched it after a several month pilot, and we already have the same number of agents. It's 20% of our workforce. If you counted each agent as an employee, it's already 20% of our workforce you could call as an agent. That's just in Glean. So how do you think about that? Who has the ability to give those agents permission to do what? You could have, in Cursor or in Claude, they could kind of do data pulls from Databricks or Snowflake that cost millions of dollars. It's too late. They've already done these things that can be very, very expensive. And so what's the oversight for that? You can't review everything. How do you fire agents? You don't want to just have everybody unleash agents on the workforce, so it becomes this whole pool of bots that are bothering everybody that everyone ignores now. So we're really kind of starting out taking a very similar approach to how we would think about employees. You have to have a process to hire them. You have to have a process to evaluate their performance. You have feedback from people that they work with. You have to offboard them correctly. What happens if the best agent maker at Nextdoor leaves the company and they're the person that's the only one? There's all this complexity that it's just not as straightforward as automate the job. So but I do think companies should be working on this. There's just clear advantages to having agentic workflows do a lot of the work that today is manual or managed by someone else.
As a chief people officer, I'm sure you're a huge proponent of having a founder's mentality woven throughout the culture. I think it's probably easier in a small business to have that sort of mindset, but as you scale up or grow, I'm sure that sort of fizzles out as you bring more people into the organization. What sort of things are you doing to make sure that kind of scrappy owner mindset stays alive inside of a scaled up company?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would recommend is to read the book, The Founder's Mentality by James Allen. He's a partner at Bain. And when our founder, Nirav Tolia, came back to be CEO at the beginning of last year, he connected with this really amazing thinker James Allen, who had written this book a few years ago where he had studied hundreds of companies that outperformed, that was tied to the founder being present either as the CEO or on the executive team or as part of the board. And he lays out this framework, that we have really borrowed from, or we've really kind of operationalized in the last 18 months or so, that I found very clarifying. Last summer was last summer was like founders mode on Twitter, like everybody was in founders mode. And I had a hard time understanding what they meant. It was almost like this, when you see it. If you're a founder and you're in founder mode, you're crushing. That's what I took away. But this book was really, really specific with some of the tools that you could implement to solve some of these challenges. And I wish I'd internalized some of the learnings much earlier, because again, some of it's really simple to understand and hard to do. One of the most powerful insights I've taken from the Founders Mentality book is being obsessed with the front line. And what that means is make sure the senior people don't get so far away from the employees who are actually touching customers. And this is what you're talking about with the small business mindset, where everyone in the small business is part of the customer experience. As you get bigger, this gets further and further away. So everything gets rolled up through reports or synthesis or someone's opinion about what's going on. It gets harder and harder for the executive team to really understand what's happening other than through dashboards or someone telling you. So it has this relentless focus on making sure everyone is as close to the actual action as possible. And that was a really helpful filter for us as we reorganized under the founder coming back. And to this day, I always catch myself being like, how can I restore this again? I feel like I'm getting too far. For the people leader, it would be like for new hires. What is actually happening with new hires in their first week? What are we actually telling our candidates? Versus that goes from recruiter to recruiting manager to the head of TA, et cetera. So I just find this is a good grounding rod to come back to. I need to go to where that's happening versus have it rolled up and prepared.
I love that, because I think too, as people get more and more disconnected, their purpose kind of goes away too. Like they're so disconnected. They're like, what am I even doing?
Yeah, it's a natural consequence of scale. Like I think as you scale, that you're looking for efficiency and leverage, but you can't take your eye off this.
You've managed over the years globally dispersed teams. I'm curious how you balance like the global consistency of like processes to scale versus like flexibility locally and just like a probably microculture within a big culture.
Yeah, I think the world is increasingly homogenized.
Yeah, especially
younger people than it was maybe 20 years ago. Where you really had to think about the friction between cultures and how particularly an American tech company might operate in another culture. So that's still a factor. You want to be sensitive to the way different cultures value different things, and it tends to play out in stuff like power dynamic and hierarchy. These are important in companies. Tech kind of famously anti-hierarchical, but cultures like China or India are very hierarchical cultures. So you can't just be like you need to be like hierarchical is bad, is what a lot of tech companies will say that, and that can become a statement on someone's cultural identity. You have to be thoughtful in how you apply what you want to be consistent in a way that isn't offensive potentially, or just is the thing you want to export is actually like American, and you got to think about what you want to do. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not. I remember, company doesn't matter, but I remember one thing where I introduced holidays globally that were not just American holidays. It was like, hey, in the UK, we're going to recognize UK holidays.
Yeah.
And it was, I couldn't believe this was like the state of things, but it was, and so that's kind of a simple one. But, your cultural identity is going to come from that consistency. So you want to really thread the needle where everyone in any country in the world can respond in the same way to the same experience. And just make sure you're not exporting something that's not gonna net out with the way that country values things.
With a lot of employers looking for talent, new skills to adapt to the changing world, we're still going to need entry level talent. And I'm curious how you think about ramping up entry level recruiting to widen the funnel and to basically be ready for these kids coming out of school or shifting jobs altogether when you're seeking, new level talent.
Yeah, I think so. I really feel for the recent class of new grads because the market's clearly turned away from them. I very much contrarian to this. I think this is a mistake. I think that every company that I've been a part of that values innovation has had a really healthy early career population. And it's important because what's in their DNA is not knowing things. And so the way you disrupt is trying things that no one else has done or everyone thinks won't work. And the more experience you get, the more bought in your assumptions become. And so people who've never worked on it, and this tends to be young people or early career, they just ask why. And they don't realize they're doing something they're not supposed to do. And so when you totally move away from that, you're probably just pattern matching around things other companies have done. That becomes the risk anyway. So just culturally, I think that, the energy and the creativity you get from healthy early career populations is really significant. And in my experience, it tends to get explained away as, well, it takes time to teach them and they don't know what to do. And there's this overhead to training, which I think is kind of overestimated how hard that is and underestimated people who have experience take work too, So, but the next wave, I really think, let's just talk about college graduates. The ones coming out like a year from now, 2 years from now, are going to be AI natives.
Yeah, they
Class
will.
of 27, their entire 4-year college career, if you just focus on that group, will have happened like after the release of ChatGPT. They've had a whole university experience with ChatGPT as a product available to the whole world. And so everyone's trying to learn how to be AI first in what they do. And so people who don't know any other way will have tremendous ways of teaching everyone else. It's really significant. So I think they're going to be really desired, for that reason alone. Because like I said, I'm spending a lot of time on this, and this is hard. This is not something people are just picking up in a couple months. And so the only way to get an advantage is to really include people who are further along. And I think that those upcoming college graduates are going to have it way, way more than people think.
I think you're right. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, but yeah, I mean, I do feel for the kids coming out of the school right now, just at a bad job market right now. But I agree, in a year or two, these next ones coming out are going to have a serious advantage coming into the workforce. They just won't have the experience, but that could be learned over time.
Yeah, I do worry if the thesis that entry-level jobs are going to be replaced is true. I'm not sure, but maybe.
Depends.
Then it's going to be hard. Lots of people have talked about this. It's hard to get on the bottom rung that becomes your ladder towards experienced. How do you become a lawyer if you can't start as a paralegal?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a real concern for a lot of people on like the future talent pipeline is you develop experience and intuition from learning from the bottom, from the beginning. And if that goes away, like what do you do?
Yeah.
That's definitely a open question.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so Nextdoor's mission is about neighbors and belonging, like literally building community. And as a chief people officer, you're trying to do that inside of an organization as well. So I'm curious, like what you've learned over the years, not only at Nextdoor, but in your previous roles as well, about what leaders could learn from you about what it means to build community inside of an organization.
Okay, so I'll say two things. Number one, this is really for managers. I think that managers tend to want to be liked by their team. That's a baseline.
Yeah.
And so, but I also find a lot of people struggle with building an authentic connection to every person on their team. They either go too deep or they don't go deep enough. Or they go too deep with some and nowhere with others, which comes out of whack. And so, but I really think getting that skill where everyone in your organization or your team feels like they can relate to you and connect to you is the first step. Like without it, it doesn't really matter what else the company is doing. If people just don't feel that connection to the leaders that are responsible for like their career development and their performance ultimately, you're going to struggle with building that. And then the second thing is I'm lucky enough to have worked for a lot of mission-oriented companies, just simple ideas that really connect to. Not everybody has that available to them, but you have to make people feel like their job is going to mean something.
Yeah.
this is a binary state. If you feel like your job, you don't understand it, you're gonna have a hard time being motivated to do anything. And if you can connect yourself to the bigger picture, you'll find more connection to your teammates and the company you're a part of, as well as more motivation to like do a good job because you feel like people are relying on you. So I would say that like leaders and managers working to build that connection with everyone, and then making sure people understand what they're doing is beyond like just crossing things off the list, and it's part of the overall success of the company you're part of.
Bryan, this has been an awesome conversation. Honestly, I could have gone a couple hours with you. You're a brilliant thinker. Got a lot of experience that a lot of people can benefit from. And I'm curious, like, are there books or thought leaders that are out there that really inspire you and get you to think about your work differently that maybe others can benefit from?
It's a great question. So I'd love to read tons of books. I just recently reconnected with an author named Tony Schwartz, who's the author of The Energy Project. And I took his training in 2006, almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
And in reconnecting with him, he's still doing the same work. He's incredibly wise. I hadn't kind of, I've often thought about his work, but I reconnected with him recently, and it made me realize how deeply integrated his practice is into my own leadership style. And it hadn't kind of took me realizing that I took the training 20 years ago and how second grain some of this is. And so it's incredibly valuable work for anyone. It comes down to a simple concept, which is you can't create more time, right? There's 24 hours in a day, and we all focus so much on getting as much as we can of those 24 hours. And there's just not enough. It's what everybody feels like all the time. But what you can do is really take steps to manage your energy, which is an infinite reservoir, quality and amount of energy you create. So he's just written multiple books. His company is excellent with training for companies or for leadership teams on how to really maximize that understanding of developing the highest caliber energy you can to bring into the world. And so I highly recommend any one of his books, but he's the CEO of the Energy Project. And I think that's great takeaway.
I'm going to put that on my reading list for sure. That's right up my alley. I read a lot too. So I always like to hear what people are reading because sometimes I just never hear about it. There's so many books out there and just so many brilliant thinkers.
People should read more. There's too much scrolling and too many shows. Reading.
Seriously.
Gotta come back to the books.
I know. We need to get back to books because I think the TikTok culture and just the YouTube videos, it's just so much out there. There's so much content, and to cut through and find the good stuff, it's challenging at times.
Yeah, my biggest fear right now is people aren't reading the books. They're watching the TikToker who says, I read this book and here are the 3 takeaways.
Yep. And of course, AI is synthesizing all that too. Like
exactly. People should just read the book themselves. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Well, Bryan, this has been so fun. What's the best way people can connect with you, learn about your work? And clearly the Nextdoor is very well known, but maybe call to action there as well.
Yeah, so if you haven't downloaded the new Nextdoor, we just rebranded and reshipped our product in about a month ago, so check it out. For me personally, I'm pretty simple. I think following me on LinkedIn is the best way to do it. Bryan with a Y, Bryan Power. I'm old enough that I still have like my whole name as my identity on these platforms, but that's the best place to find me.
My guest today has been Bryan Power, the Chief People Officer at Nextdoor. Bryan, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brandon.